This video is for business leaders who want themselves and their employees to have more mastery over all aspects of their lives, making them more effective at everything, including business. So watch to the end of this video to get more insights into how to better apply the principles that I'm going to talk about today in your own life. And also some insights into the article behind this video, which is an article I wrote quite a long time ago. It's actually a really long article. I struggled to pare it down, and it may well wind up being 2 episodes because I have an absolute maximum length of 15 minutes, and I'm not sure I can cover all of it in 30, even with the pared down version. So what follows is essentially from principles from a book called, so this is a book summary and a book review, but at the same time, tutorial about how to be confident. There's a lot of misinformation out there, especially this popular nonsense about give everybody self-esteem and they will be successful. That has long ago within the scientific community itself been thoroughly and completely disproven to be a reverse causation. That is, they got the causation backwards. Self-esteem causes nothing but narcissism if it's not earned. Rather, working hard and achieving something causes self-esteem, i.e. success causes self-esteem, not vice versa. So essentially what follows is 10 rules from Russ Harris's excellent book, The Confidence Gap. I highly recommend it. Excellent book. I loved it. I was actually listening to it as I rode up a mountain in the dark to do some video on said mountain. In any case, each rule is basically followed by my own independently derived version of the same rule. That is, I've developed in my own life and my own work. These, I wouldn't call them rules, I would call them principles. So for each one, his is rule 1, mine would be T1, T2, T3, as where his are rule 1, rule 2, rule 3. And in the cases where I had no equivalent rule, I just left them out. But I thought it was really interesting because when I read this book, how much overlap there was between this author's work and my own personal principles that I developed. For my own purposes. In essence, all of my work is centered around my own success and self-development journey, and now I've just translated it into something, a format that can help other people, and in particular business leaders, make their businesses better. Okay, so let's get into this. That is, rule number 1 is the actions of confidence precede the feeling of confidence, not the other way around. So that's a paraphrased statement from Russ Harris's book. Actions, that is, the actions confident people take, happen, and then those actions, when they lead to success inevitably, at least some of the time, cause people to feel confident. Go figure. To me, it was so painfully obvious. I don't know how this was ever came to be the mess that it was, and how those psychologists way back then didn't get it. In any case, I wasn't there. So here's the same rule as above, sort of stated for myself, and that is success causes self-esteem, not the other way around. That's really what it comes down to. And of course, self-esteem and self-confidence are interlinked, but you don't get legitimate confidence from fake self-esteem or unearned self-esteem. So if you learn or remember nothing else from this video, remember that. That will serve both you and your employees and anybody else in your life you want to help better than pretty much anything. You have to do something to earn your self-esteem or your confidence for it to be real. Otherwise, it's fragile and fake. And Generation Y and Z have demonstrated this repeatedly. Of course, there's some accomplished people in these generations, and why wouldn't there be? But there's a massive population of people, none of them their own fault, who are raised under this egregious misinterpretation of the science by getting the causation backwards. So essentially, the deeply broken, literally backward belief that self-esteem causes success is related and equally backward. That's what happened. Psychologists who first researched the direction of causation for these principles, that is, that self-esteem somehow magically causes success, got it completely backwards. So Dr. Russ Harris, the author of the book that is the main inspiration for this video, and the article that this video is based on, started as a GP, but he became kind of disillusioned with treating every problem with a prescription out of his doctor's notepad. So he became interested in, over time, and eventually a practitioner of something called acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT for short. And it's quite similar to CBT, which you may or may not know, but that's cognitive behavioral therapy, often referred to by some of the most respected psychologists in the academic realm, at least the ones who I've read, as the gold standard. So I've heard Roy Baumeister refer to it as the gold standard in therapy, and I've also heard Jonathan Haidt, both of them in some of their books refer to it in that light. So needless to say, it's well respected. And they're the same in that they're similar in that they both focus on mindfulness techniques. Now, almost everything in both of these systems is something you can do, and that's essentially what I'm going to teach and share with you here today. So I personally think that this is all Buddhist mindfulness practices, and that the Buddhist approach is actually far more, or the most direct and pragmatic manifestation or iteration of this, and the simplest of the three, that is from CBT, ACT, cognitive behavioral therapy, action and commitment therapy, and Buddhist mindfulness. That's probably because Buddhism had about 2,500 years head start on the R&D of mindfulness. But I just want to make this very clear. I'm not Buddhist. I'm not religious whatsoever. It's just that I'm actually what you call an optimistic nihilist. And maybe I should put a link in here, or at least in the description, to share the video which tells you what an optimistic nihilist is. I didn't know until I watched the video, but it's exactly what I am. So essentially what I do is I use what works with absolutely no bias towards its source. That's why I think that the Buddhist mindfulness is great. It just works. It doesn't matter whether it comes from a religious system or a scientific system. To me, if it doesn't work scientifically, personally, in my own life, I just discount it completely because it doesn't work for me. And I wouldn't recommend something for anybody else that doesn't certainly work for me also. So, like I said, this is basically, to me, ACT is basically Buddhist mindfulness wrapped in the framework of modern psychology. So below are the 10 rules that I've referred to already, verbatim out of the book, followed by my techniques and complementary interpretation of, commentary interpretation of each. So rule 1 is the act of confidence comes first, the feelings of confidence come later. That's his exact phrasing. So my version of that, T1, is confidence is earned through effort, failure, perseverance, and eventually success. That is, confidence is earned via actually doing something in the real world, objective results. So Harris and Buddhism talk about embracing and transforming one's relationship with confidence or with fear. Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead. Rule 2, genuine confidence is not the absence of fear. It's a transformed relationship with fear. I don't talk about it that way. I don't think of it that way. Harris and Buddhism talk about these two things as embracing and transforming one's relationship with fear. I prefer to reframe and redirect my attention and ignore it. That is, I don't deny it, but I don't give it any attention because it's not productive to me. So essentially, fear is a physiological response to real or imagined threats, nothing more, nothing less. Now, this comes from my background in psychology and neuroscience, just a BSc, but I know what I'm talking about. And so my version of this rule is essentially just redirect your attention to something constructive and acknowledge, but otherwise ignore the fear or stress or whatever it is until it subsides. And this actually kind of aligns with CBT, because CBT would talk about avoiding rumination. You might be afraid of something, but if you focus on and ruminate, keep repeating to yourself about how afraid you are, that's going to make you more afraid. So I just basically give fear no more time than I absolutely have to. And then I don't ignore it, or I ignore it, I acknowledge it, but it's like I'm busy thinking of other things. And the thing about this is it just, your mind can only think of one thing at a time. So I'm going to go on to rule 3, stumbling a bit today. So rule 3 is negative thoughts are normal. Don't fight them, diffuse them. My version, T3, is I neither diffuse nor fight negative thoughts. I reframe them as a fundamentally useless thing to engage in and refocus onto solutions, progress, and gratitude instead. Believe me, I have plenty of negative thoughts. It isn't that I don't have them, but when I recognize that I'm in them, when I become mindful of them, it's like, well, this is an absolutely useless engagement of my time and brain power. I should put it somewhere else, like how to solve this, or to think of anything else, useful, fun, or anything else. So essentially, if in my own technique, if these thoughts are extra persistent, I just drop them like a hot rock and refocus my attention on other mental or physical activities, as I've basically just described. It's the basic premise of meditation that the mind can't focus on 2 things at once. So if you have fear or negative thoughts, if you think, I'm not thinking about a white bear, I'm not thinking about a white bear, over and over in your head, you will not be thinking about your negative thoughts because you're busy not thinking about a white bear, which of course is going to make you think about a white bear. But you can't do both at once. It's just the way your brain really works. So essentially, rule number 4 is self-acceptance trumps self-esteem. And I just completely agree with this. I have no equivalent really. Their finding was that there was essentially, and this was Baumeister and other researchers looked at about 200 pieces of research. They went through a few thousand. They got rid of everything that was really bad science, and they got it down to 200 that were really well designed experiments. And then they took those and they did a meta-analysis on all of them. And here's what they found about the correlation between self-esteem and success. There was no correlation between self-esteem and success. So as you can tell in this video, I'm using confidence and self-esteem fairly interchangeably because they're that tightly interrelated, or at least they are in my mind. So rule number 5 is hold your values lightly, but pursue them vigorously. So this is kind of their version of follow your bliss. I don't really consider creativity and helping others a value as Harris does, not a moral value as I think of them. I like the idea of holding them lightly though, and I think of this as mindset. That is, if somebody watches this video and they can teach me something I had no idea of, and it's validated, that is, don't tell me about some religious thing that's unprovable, because that's meaningless to me. I couldn't care less. Show me something that's provable, and I would love to hear about it, and I will do a video to reverse everything I've said if I see something. That's the idea of holding a value lightly, a belief lightly, because if it's disproven, you would be a fool to hang on to it. And unfortunately, most people with respect to that one point are fools. They could have something dropped on their head and say, nothing fell on my head, because they would rather maintain their belief than face the evidence that they're not true. So it looks like that's about as much time as we have. So I'm going to continue from there on the next one. This has been Crush It Club 207, How to Be Confident, The Confidence Gap, Book Review and Summary. My name is Tim B. Green. Bye for now.